deep in the heart of a primeval jungle, where the air hung heavy with mystery. Two of the deadliest predators the world had ever known were about to cross paths, though neither knew it yet. On one side of the river, stomping through the ferns with all the swagger of a king, was a young Tyrannosaurus Rex named Ripper. On the other side of the same river, slicing through the water like an apex predator of his own design, was Spike, a young and proud Spinosaurus. To say Ripper had a healthy appetite would be an understatement. Anything smaller than him was dinner, or so he believed. Spike thought of the river as his domain, his personal buffet table filled with tasty fish, and the occasional careless land creature that wandered too close to the water's edge. It all began one humid morning, as the jungle buzzed to life. Ripper had just found what he thought was going to be his breakfast. A fat, juicy carcass lying conveniently in a clearing. But to his outrage, when he arrived, the food was already gone. Just a few shredded scraps left behind. Meanwhile, Spike swam upriver toward his favorite fishing spot. But as he approached the shallows, his day took a disappointing turn. The stash of fish he'd left near the shore the day before? Gone. Every single one. Both dinosaurs had the same thought. Who dares mess with my food? For several days, this pattern continued. Ripper's scavenging mission seemed constantly thwarted, while Spike's fishing trips ended with empty bellies. Each time they thought they had found a meal, they were met with disappointment. Both Ripper and Spike shared the same indignant thought. Who dares mess with my food? Each failure fueled their determination, as they vowed to catch the thief who dared steal from them. The Great Plains stretched out under a cloud-streaked sky, golden grasses swaying gently in the warm breeze. Herds of Triceratops grazed in peace, their massive forms moving in unison. Horned heads dipped to the ground, jaws ripping at ferns and shrubs, their tails flicking away insects lazily. Among them, a towering adult named Nara stood nearest to the edge of the herd. Her senses were sharp, her gaze scanning the horizon like a watchful guardian. She had to be. Life as a Triceratops wasn't just about eating, it was about surviving. And trouble often came silently. Nara's nostrils flared as an unfamiliar scent drifted through the air. Faint, but unmistakable. Predator. She froze, her muscles tightening, and raised her great crested head to scan the tall grass. The herd moved uneasily behind her, the younger Triceratops bunching closer to their elders as they sensed her alarm. Nara's 3 formidable horns glinted in the sunlight as she stood her ground, ready to defend her kind. Then she spotted it. A flash of movement in the grass. Only the top of a mottled back was visible, slinking low to the ground, inching closer. Nara bellowed loudly, stamping her massive foot in warning. A challenge. The predator stopped. Slowly, its head rose out of the grass, revealing 2 amber-colored eyes, sharp but cautious. A juvenile Allosaurus. Nara's breath came heavy, her chest heaving as she pawed the ground, preparing for what seemed inevitable. Allosaurs were hunters, quick and vicious, and even a young one could be dangerous if desperate enough. The creature must have seen opportunity in her herd. A lone straggler to pick off, perhaps. With a thunderous roar, Nara charged forward, lowering her horns in a powerful display. The Allosaurus flinched, retreating several steps. Yet it didn't attack. It didn't even snarl in aggression. Instead, it stumbled backward, tripping over its thin, scaly legs. Nara skidded to a halt just a few paces away, her massive frame towering over it, ready to gore the predator if it lunged. But something was wrong. The Allosaurus wasn't attacking. It was trembling. Its ribs were visible beneath its dark hide, its breathing shallow and unsteady. This wasn't the confident posture of a predator preparing to strike. Nara tilted her head, her instincts warring with her curiosity. Why didn't it fight back? Why wasn't it snarling or circling like they always did? Hunger burned in its amber eyes, but it was not the kind of hunger that turned into action. It was weak, its frame thin and ragged, its movement sluggish. And for the first time, Nara noticed that it wasn't even watching the herd. Its gaze was locked on a drooping patch of ferns nearby. It wasn't hunting them. It wasn't even looking at them. It was starving. The realization hit Nara unexpectedly. Her breath steadied, but her unease only deepened. The herd behind her groaned softly, nervous and restless. They would want to get moving soon, away from the threat this predator represented, young or not. But Nara didn't move, not yet. She kept her horns pointed at the Allosaurus, watching it carefully. The creature hesitated, its amber eyes flicking up to hers for the briefest moment before it collapsed onto the ground, too weak to stand any longer. For what felt like an eternity, Nara stayed rooted to the spot, her tail swaying rhythmically as the instinct to lash out battled with something different. She had fought off threats to the herd before, but this was not a threat. Not now, at least. It was just a lost, desperate creature, one barely out of its own hatchling years. Predators were supposed to be enemies. They threatened the survival of the herd. And yet, there was something in the Allosaurus's frail form that tugged at her resolve. As much as she hated to admit it, it reminded her of a newly hatched Triceratops, helpless and unsure, vulnerable to the harsh world around it. She snorted, taking a cautious step closer. The Allosaurus lifted its head weakly at her movement, a low, pitiful noise escaping its mouth. It didn't fight. It didn't flee. It only watched her with weary eyes. Behind her, the herd began to shuffle again, some letting out low, questioning calls. In the vast expanse of Cretaceous wilderness, there's no such thing as certainty, only instinct. And instinct was telling this velociraptor something it couldn't ignore. The creature's sharp toe, claws tapped lightly against the forest floor as it slunk between thick ferns and towering cycads. Its amber eyes darted skyward again. Right above the treetops, that massive figure was there, wings outstretched, soaring in lazy loops, a pteranodon. At first, the velociraptor thought nothing of it. After all, pteranodons were fish-eaters, not hunters of land-bound prey. But the way this one circled, it felt deliberate, purposeful. Could it really be stalking? It didn't matter if this pteranodon wasn't a predator by nature. If it thought of this raptor as weak, or worse, an easy target, it was in for a rude awakening. Keeping one eye on the creature overhead, the velociraptor crept forward. Its path wound through the dense underbrush, the forest unusually quiet except for the faint whoosh of the great creature's wings above. Each time the raptor thought it had shaken its aerial shadow, the silhouette reappeared, dipping lower, closer. The velociraptor's pulse began to race. Okay, if this was going to be a fight, better to pick the time and the place. somewhere where it could strike first. Somewhere like this. It reached a clearing, a patch of rocky terrain surrounded by tall cliffs. Perfect. No more trees for the pteranodon to duck behind. Climbing atop a large stone, the velociraptor craned its neck to glare straight into the sky. Teeth glinted. A low growl rumbled from its throat. Enough running. The pteranodon, so vast and leisurely, suddenly folded its wings tight and dropped like an arrow. In a blink, it was there, swooping right toward the raptor with its sharp beak gleaming in the sunlight. With a shriek, the velociraptor leapt, powerful legs propelling it high into the air, claws outstretched. This pteranodon had underestimated its prey, and it would pay dearly. But then, a rush of sound, a deep rumble, like thunder cracking underground. Both creatures froze mid-motion, the velociraptor landing lightly on its feet as the pteranodon swooped back upward. The raptor turned its head toward the cliffs and saw it. The earth was sliding. No, not sliding, collapsing. Tons of mud and debris cascaded down the cliff face, crashing wildly onto the clearing where it stood. Boulders, uprooted trees, and rivers of mud came barreling forward at terrible speed. The velociraptor bolted, its small form zigzagging wildly to avoid the falling rubble. Its mind barely had time to process what was happening, but through the chaos, one constant remained, a streak of shadow above, leading it forward. The pteranodon wasn't attacking. It wasn't even pursuing. It was guiding. Another chunk of hillside gave way behind the velociraptor, forcing it to leap across jagged terrain. And there was the pteranodon, not leaving, not fleeing the growing disaster. Instead, it swooped low, letting out a piercing cry, a sound that pulled the raptor's gaze toward a narrow path weaving out of the danger zone. The velociraptor didn't question. It ran. In seconds, the mudslide swallowed the clearing entirely. Earth cracked and groaned beneath the enormous weight of the debris. But the velociraptor, thanks to its guide, had made it to safer ground. A rocky ridge overlooking the chaos below. Breath heaving and legs trembling, it watched the remaining dust settle. The world grew still again. And then, from above, a flutter of wings. The pteranodon circled once more, this time slower, almost lazily, before banking away into the open sky. No ambush, no stalking predator. It simply disappeared, heading toward the rising sun. The velociraptor stood there for a long moment, its keen mind piecing it all together. The pteranodon had never been an enemy. It hadn't wanted prey or power. Instead, it had simply wanted to warn the raptor, to save it from certain doom. This moment, a near miss with catastrophe, wasn't just about survival. The raptor had learned something it didn't yet have words to express, but it was etched deep in its instincts now. Not every shadow is a threat. Not every approach signals harm. In the ancient and unforgiving wilderness, where every day brought new dangers, finding an unexpected ally, even one as unlikely as a creature of the sky, could be the difference between life and death. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson wasn't reserved for raptors or pteranodons. So here's the question for you. Have you ever assumed someone was out to get you, only to find out they were helping? What did that experience teach you? Just like our velociraptor learned, sometimes it's worth asking what someone's intentions truly are before assuming the worst. Being open to help, even when it feels strange or unexpected, just might lead you to safety. Or something even greater.